So in this second review, we're looking at quadratics, factoring, and imaginary numbers. The first one asks me, it says for the function x squared minus 2x minus 15, over which of the following intervals is f of x greater than 0? Always. The word always is probably not necessary there. So this one, I'm going to graph this function on my calculator, and we see that it has roots at -3 and 5, which we could also find by factoring the quadratic. So we have -5 plus 3 giving me roots at +5 and -3, which matches up with the graph. We know that this is a quadratic, so it's going to have this shape and both sides point up because x squared is positive. So now we're finding the intervals where f of x, which is y, is greater than 0. So that's on the two ends of the graph where we see that's true. It's greater than 0. This is where y is equal to 0. So that's where x is less than -3, so in this direction, and then also where x is greater than 4. We want to be careful. This does not say equal to 0, so these signs do not include equals. The next question asks about where this graph is decreasing. A different question than the top one. The top one is asking about y values. This is asking about slope, or where the slope is decreasing. So this one, if we were to graph it on our calculator, we would get this graph. With a second calc maximum, we would find, or maybe, tracing a table, you can also find, because it's on a nice integer value, that the max is at 617. So it's decreasing on this side of the graph, going down. So that's from x equals 6 to infinity. So just to write this in the interval notation, that would be 6 to infinity. We don't include the turning point in the decreasing, but that could also be written as x is greater than 6. Just for the top one, why don't we write that out too? If we had written this answer in interval notation, that would be -infinity to -3. And we can write or we can also write, we can actually use the union symbol, just in case you see that from probability, to say it's decreasing, or it's above 0, y is greater than 0 on that piece, or on that piece. We're uniting them together, union bringing the two together. So the next one looks like a factoring problem. So even though it looks a little weird with all those variables, I'm going to try grouping because it has 4 terms. So the GCF of the first two is 2x, and then I have x minus 4a. The GCF of the second two is 3b, and that's also going to leave me with x minus 2a, which makes me wonder if I made a mistake on the beginning part, and I did. When I take out the 2, this should be a 2a. So now we have the binomial GCF, which we take out, x minus 2a, and 2x plus 3b. So looking through my answers, that looks like it's choice 1. So the next question is actually already factored for me. To multiply it out would just create extra work. Here I have a set of 3 factors. Really, there's 2 factors here, but we can treat them as one because we have an x minus 7 and another x minus 7. And we know once an equation is factored and set equal to 0, we can set each of those factors equal to 0 to solve it. So here is just division, right? So we get x equals 0, we get x equals 7 here. On this one, we would subtract the 2, divide by 3, so I get -2/3. There is actually a double root at 7 because there's 2 factors, so if we thought about the graph, we would see things with double roots, and we talked about that in the last day of review. So looking for my correct choice, I want this one. I don't get a plus or minus 7. I'm going to cross out these. This is, if you look at these -5s, that's if you didn't know what to do with the 5x to solve. And then we don't have a plus or minus because there's just both of these. If we wrote them out, both of them would give me a +7. So we have 2 answers of +7, which we just need to write as one answer. The next one, we have a negative in the radical. The negative on the outside is just going to stay. So I'm going to write that in red. On the inside, I'm going to break up the 98 into a perfect square, so 49 and a leftover. 98 is 49 times 2. You might have to check that out on your calculator to figure it out. I'm going to put the negative over here. Whenever I have a negative and a radical, I'm going to use the fact that the square root of -1 is I. So whenever I take the square root of a negative, I get whatever I would get without the negative in addition to an I. So this is going to be 7I. The radical 2 is going to stay, and then that negative sign, it can't cancel. Like these two negative signs can't cancel because one means a negative number, one is giving me the I. So my correct answer here is number 1. And we'll fill this one in. It was number 3.